All right, welcome back, Flying Scooters, Crew Call with the Scooters, and my very dear friend Jessi Marsh, Senior Development Director. Am I correct about that?
Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships.
There it is.
You're
There's
close.
there's the there's the title at Food Rescue Hero, which is the technology behind what a lot of people in Pittsburgh would know would be 412 Food Rescue. So it's the technology that powers getting fresh food and produce and fruits and vegetables to underserved communities. And I am so excited that you're here. It's been, we've been doing this. We're 50 some episodes and I was finally able to grab you. So I'm happy to I'm happy that that's been able to happen. So welcome. Welcome my friend.
Thank you. It's always fun to do anything with you. So
Yeah.
when Jennifer Schleiper asks me to do something, I just say yes.
I appreciate that. And I will remember that. Let's write this down. It's
Let's not.
2:12 on a Wednesday. Okay, so let's talk. You've had this really incredible career that I want to talk about because you have been in this space for a really long time, probably even before college. But you also have this incredible personal story, which I think is worth talking about because when you talk about people that have who are resilient and keep getting off the mat, I think you're one of those people that have consistently charged through, which is always not only inspiring but also kind of awestruck in that to see you kind of move and grow and do what you do. So, you were born where, Jess? Let's start at birth. Where were you born?
I was born at McGee Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh,
In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So,
May 1st, 1978.
so send birthday gifts to.
Yes, please.
Um, so let's talk about you went to school for what? What was your undergrad in?
Yeah, I chose Ohio University because of the journalism school and decided to be an advertising management major. Was president of the ad club, which we actually kind of had our own little agency that we did little campaigns for, like, real estate agents in Athens, Ohio. And we thought it was a huge deal, by the way. Um, this bench ad for this real estate agent is probably still there. Um, so I was really focused on going to New York and working for an agency. And I was volunteering with a homeless shelter in Athens at the time, Good Works Incorporated. And basically, the executive director of the homeless shelter just asked me if I would. I think the way he put it was, "Would you give a year of your life away?"
Hmm.
And I said, "No, absolutely not. I'm going to New York. I've had this dream forever. There's no way I'm not doing it." And then I went home and I couldn't sleep. So, sometimes you just know you're supposed to do something, and it kind of takes a little bit for the rest of you to come around to execute on that. So I did, and I stayed in Athens, Ohio, and worked at Good Works Incorporated for actually about 2.5 years, and really loved working with people who were facing homelessness. I started as a volunteer coordinator, and then I became a case manager, and then I became a shelter supervisor. And I probably could have stayed there a very long time. I really liked it, but I also wanted to move somewhere else. And so 12 of my friends and I moved to Seattle, Washington, which I always joke about that. You schedule lunch with somebody now and you have to reschedule it 3 times. And somehow we moved across the country, 12 people with like 2 cell phones. Um, I
So
really don't know how we
you're
did
saying that
that.
it is possible. It is possible to get
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, it was a miracle. So we did. And when I was out there for close to 3 years, I worked for a few different social service organizations and had different positions, which was really valuable. I really came to understand volunteer management at a deep level, started to get into communications and fundraising a little bit. And so then ended up moving back to Pittsburgh and had a couple more jobs at nonprofit organizations, I worked briefly at the Arthritis Foundation and learned a lot about nonprofit marketing, direct mail. When you work for kind of a national public health organization, you really sort of get the playbook. Whereas I had worked for much more grassroots organizations before that, and it was kind of like, do whatever, write something and send it out and see if it works. Whereas there was actually some marketing strategy behind what the Arthritis Foundation was doing. So I learned some things about that. So then I became the director of youth programs at Community Human Services in Oakland. And so I was kind of like the principal of like this real, loud school. So I ran after school programming and summer day camp. And the thing that I think about whenever I think about that job is like whenever the kids would, get in trouble, they would get sent to my office. And I felt like that was so hilarious that I'm the adult that I'm like, where's an adult? Oh, it's me. I'm the one. Okay, what do we do about this? I don't know. You hit somebody or something, just don't do that.
Yeah.
So like being Miss Jessi was very weird. So that was kind of a turning point where I was like, oh, I'm the adult now. Which was good because my next job, I had a lot of responsibility. I served as the director of development for a Light of Life rescue mission for over 9 years. Kind of started out as a major gift officer, then became assistant director of development, and then really quickly was in the DoD seat. Just really had to figure a lot of things out, hiring the right staff, learning things that I didn't know about. I think that's always kind of been a big part of how I work, is to just say, I don't know how to do this. We can figure it out. Just give me a little time and talk to the right people, because somebody always knows how to do this thing that we don't know how to do. So just kind of having that ability to hire the right people who are experts in their areas and then build something really amazing. We tripled revenue over the time I was there, built some really cool signature events. The Flying Scooter team had a lot to do with that and continues to. So I left Light of Life to do consulting. I kind of felt like I had learned how to build a really strong development, communications, marketing program. And so I worked for two different consulting groups, one out of Raleigh, North Carolina. We had clients all over. And then I worked for an agency out of New York. So it kind of all came full circle. I did get to that New York agency eventually. But I spent about a year traveling around and visiting clients and really loved it. But once COVID hit, it was very isolating. I felt very by myself at my dining room table and sort of no end in sight, because my colleagues were scattered all over as well. So ended up having some conversations and had worked as a consultant before with 412 Food Rescue. And the stars kind of aligned, and I was invited to serve as the senior director of strategic partnerships for Food Rescue Hero, which, as you mentioned, is the technology that powers 412 Food Rescue and 9 other nonprofit food rescue organizations across the US and Canada.
I think it's really interesting because you've had this really interesting trajectory. And instead of bouncing right into another role, a big role, Light of Life was a big role, Food Rescue Hero, big role, you took time to see and listen and hear. And I think that was really smart in terms of learning, because that is the one thing that you constantly do. I think anybody in development, marketing, nonprofit, for profit, whatever, we're always learning. You have to, or you're washed up in yesterday's news. So I think that's the one thing that you're constantly good at, is learning. But I think it was really smart in your career to take a minute and take time and go, I know this space, I'm going to learn other spaces to bring it back, because it has lifted, I think, what you're doing even now. And I think that's really, really smart. I thought that was a really smart play for not only sanity, but also for your career, because to go out and have different experiences. I've done that where you shuffle around and you think about, okay, I haven't done this, let's try to go do this. It makes you a deeper thinker, a broader thinker. So the question I have is, what did you learn in that space and time? How would you is that something that you would recommend for other people to do?
Sure. So I think that I think that consulting is 50% sharing what you know, creating solutions for problems either that you haven't seen before or that you have, applying, past creative solutions and kind of, retrofitting those so that they can solve this problem. So you kind of have this whole, you know, treasure trove of knowledge that you've acquired, but because you're also approaching new problems and you're getting to see how this organization does. Well, maybe we're here at this organization focusing on this problem. I notice they do this other thing over here really well. And I want to think about how that could be used to solve the problems of other clients. So I think that's part of it, just kind of you're half learning and half sharing, and that's always kind of happening simultaneously. I learned how to parachute into an organization and quickly get a lay of the land, quickly figure out, okay, who's in charge, who's making the decisions, who, has a lot of feelings about this situation that we kind of need to talk about. Sometimes that's underlying. And the consultant sort of needs to poke at that stuff to help everyone figure out, what the problem really is. Um, I am always energized and excited by meeting people who have kind of given their lives to nonprofit organizations. You see people's passion. I've gotten pretty excited about almost every mission of every organization that I've worked for because you can just see how excited and passionate people are about it, and I kind of I catch that easily, and it becomes really fun for me to work on the ideas that I have and kind of getting into the stream with them of the passion of that particular mission. I think I've learned a lot about accountability.
Mm.
A good consultant will make sure they are communicating really clearly about, this is what we're going to do. This is how much time it's going to take. This is how much money it's going to cost, and kind of staying really accountable to those things, because when you mess up in that way and the client's not happy, it's not good. And so just realizing that, always delivering, I think just always, delivering on what you said you would do and a little bit more. I think that's really important. I think having a really strong work ethic is important in consulting. I've had some good partners, I've had some good mentors, and I think that has really prepared me to kind of, I represented Light of Life as a brand for a long time, and was responsible for the overall financial health of the organization, also the brand, and then kind of spent these years consulting where it was like kind of diving in and just solving a problem real quick and figuring something out, creating a strategy, creating a plan. And now I'm at another organization where the brand is really important to me. The mission is really important to me. I feel like I'm a steward of what it is and also responsible for growing it into the next thing it can be. So I think that the consulting provides kind of that ability to shift gears quickly and kind of roll with things, but then that long-term commitment to an organization kind of gives you that long-term view. Like, this is what's going to matter in a few years. So having had both of those types of experiences, I think is really valuable.
So let's talk a little bit about your role that I totally flubbed on the intro as strategist at Food Rescue here. We don't have to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but in terms of what's important, I think there's been a lot of conversation around food deserts, food insecurity, um, and I don't think a lot of people understand it, to be quite honest with you. I think if you live in the city, you probably know it more. I think if you are coming in and out of neighborhoods, you see it more, you understand it more. But give me a broad stroke of what it really means. It not only to community, but I would even say kids.
Hmm. So 40% of the food we produce gets wasted, gets thrown in the garbage, goes to the landfill.
Now, what does that mean? Like, if I'm cooking dinner and it's pretty decent,
Everybody feels really bad when they start talking about this, by the way. This is like all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I threw out those grapes that were
is that
just
what that means? Is
mushy.
that what it means? Where it's like I'm throwing away things in my refrigerator? Or are we talking about like a Costco or a Giant Eagle or a Cisco?
Good question. So food is wasted at every level of what happens to food, whether it ends up in our bellies or in the landfill,
Okay.
where it's produced. Sometimes, fruit and vegetables are not even picked
Mhm.
at certain farms, certain orchards. Not everything gets taken, right? And so it just drops and never leaves where it was born, right? Then food gets lost along the way because it's bruised, because it doesn't look nice. Sometimes it just it doesn't get to where it was supposed to go to, and too much time has passed. And now it's not good. Um, at the retail level, where, at your store, you're seeing all of the fruits and vegetables that are perfect, pretty much. There's stuff that probably came to that store that's not perfect, and that store doesn't necessarily know what to do with it,
Okay.
but they do know that employees throwing away food that's perfectly good, but maybe just has one little bruise spot, or, is colored a little strangely. Employees don't like to throw away that food. It kind of makes them feel bad, in the same way that when we clean out our refrigerator before we go to the store, sometimes after we come back from the store, which is so annoying when you have all your, groceries, and then you're like, oh, now I have to clean out the refrigerator. And
Mhm.
you're just throwing stuff down the garbage disposal and throwing stuff in the trash. People who are really good about this stuff are composting and trying really hard not to waste that food, but it happens to everyone. So all those places, food is wasted. And that is a huge issue. So overall, it ends up being that we're not using 40% of the food that's produced. And when you think about it, there's a lot of resources that go into producing that food. So not only is that 40% of the food that is produced not being used, all of the water that you needed to grow the plants or water the animals, all of the feed to feed the animals, it's really kind of astounding. And so when you have this food waste problem, which I think is a really universally acknowledged moral problem, I don't think anybody feels great about throwing food away, right? Just in and of itself. Then you consider that pre-pandemic, 1 in 9 people were facing food insecurity,
Mhm.
and now it's 1 in 5. And they're saying it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Define food insecurity. I don't know if people understand what that means. So 1 in 9, is that everybody? Is that just a certain population? Is that a certain zip code? Now it's 1 in 5. I mean, is it
Yeah.
really in my backyard?
So that's everyone, that's Americans. Um, in some places, it's very concentrated that people are food insecure. And what food insecurity means is that a person doesn't know where their next meal is coming from on a regular basis. So it doesn't mean they can't get food. There are resources, but it may be, well, this pantry is open, but not until tomorrow. And I'm not sure if I have a ride, and I have my 3 children and I have to work, and they're only open till 5. So there's a lot of barriers for people who are, low income, when they might not have a reliable vehicle. it's very difficult to use public transportation, especially when you have children and you're working. I mean, it can take many, many hours to get to a place where there is food. Sometimes it's hard to transport it. Again, the public transportation. I just always think about a single mom with 3 kids who's trying to make it work with 2 different jobs and keep, aware of what the schedule is for the different places that might be giving food away. And I'm on the bus and I missed the stop and now I have to get off and get back on, and I have all these, kids with me, and they're hungry and they're probably tired and cranky. And to me, that just sounds like I could not do that. I don't know how people make it work.
It's fresh produce and into underserved community. I think there's a lot of disclaimers and a lot of people. I think one of the things is, is it, why should I care that I'm getting the fresh fruits? But fresh fruits and vegetables can really change a person, their health, their mental well-being, all of those things that happen in what people are talking about, underserved communities. Can you talk a little bit? Can you define that a little bit? Because it's food insecurity and it's like, okay, I have to take the bus to get to where I'm going. So how are we? Because when we talk about people powered tech, the food rescue hero of it all, we're thinking about it that way. Talk to me about some of these kind of buzz terms that have popped up, I would say even more recently around COVID, that people are hearing about. I don't think people understand fully what this means. It's, if I'm food insecure, I might have access, but I don't really have access, because is it, I have access to food, but if I have to take 3 buses to get there and have to leave my job early to do it, is that really what we would call access?
Right.
I'm going to say no. I'm just going to go out there and say, yeah, it's not really access.
I would say I would concur.
Okay.
I think that so food rescue, where we are rescuing surplus food, mostly fresh food, mostly fruits and vegetables, some dairy, some meat, some bread. Rescuing that and getting it to a person who needs it that same day is really how it works. Not cans of food that go from a warehouse somewhere to a warehouse somewhere else and sit there until a truck can take it out to the pantry. That stuff is important.
Yes.
That canned food is needed.
Yeah.
But food rescue is different, because we are picking up something in the morning that's going to end up on someone's dinner table that night. 412 Food Rescue, which is powered by Food Rescue Hero technology, specifically works with volunteers being the transportation. And that large number of volunteers that can help to transport food that becomes available in small quantities, in unpredictable frequencies. It's like Giant Eagle grocery store got, more apples this week than it could sell. So there's extra apples. And instead of throwing them away, they set them aside for 412 Food Rescue. And a volunteer who has downloaded our app gets a notification that there are these apples at Giant Eagle. And so they can claim the rescue like an Uber driver would claim a ride. They drive to the Giant Eagle and they pick it up, and it has built-in instructions for then taking it to, say, a shelter or a soup kitchen that, typically isn't too far away, that they can drive it to. And then those ingredients are either used for the meal that night, or they're given away just as apples, depending on what it is. So when at 412 Food Rescue, when we are providing food, we're taking it to all of these different distribution points. And we try to be creative. We work with shelters, we work with soup kitchens, we work with the housing authority So in many cases, we're taking food directly to buildings where a high concentration of people who are facing food insecurity live. We're taking it to small pantries. We're taking it sometimes to daycare centers that will distribute some of the food. So we're always trying to think about where people are and how we can get the food even closer to them. Since the onset of the pandemic, we have created a home delivery option. So certain volunteers that go through a background check are able to actually take boxes of food and drop them off directly on people's porches. So we've done bus stop distribution when kids were not going to school and not accessing the free breakfast or free lunch.
Mhm.
He became really concerned about children and food insecurity, because if kids are used to getting 2 meals a day at school, that's a huge burden on parents. And while the schools definitely tried to provide those meals, they were really not able to distribute them very well because they don't, necessarily have a system like that. And so we were able to help and make sure that food was being distributed at bus stops. We know that kids can get to the bus stop because they have to get there to go to school. So if we could get the food as close as the bus stops,
Right.
that meant that we would be able to get food right to kids and families where they live. So that idea of food deserts, there not being a lot of grocery stores in certain neighborhoods. You'll hear about, the best option for someone within walking distance might be a gas station, and that is typically not food that is very healthy. So when you have to do your grocery shopping at a gas station, your choices are very limited. So there are definitely neighborhoods that have a lot more options and neighborhoods that have fewer options. And so food rescue, one of the, it's about rescuing surplus food, but on the addressing food insecurity side, it's about getting it as close to people as possible, so that access is provided.
When we say 1 in 9 before the pandemic, and now it's 1 in 5, simply, and some people watching this would probably go, I know why that is, but why is it? Why is it 1 in 5? If you, everybody's home, is it because they couldn't get to where they needed to go? Is that, talk to me about that.
I think a lot of it is about the economic situation, with some businesses closing temporarily or permanently. A lot of people who are employed but maybe make a lower wage. A lot of those people had hours cut. If you think about everything, just think about the restaurant industry and how, restaurants had to close, then they could be 25% capacity, then they were closed, then they were 50% capacity, then only outdoor. And so all of that really impacted all of the people who work for those places.
Yeah.
And so I think there were a lot of impacts like that, the types of business, and not just restaurants, entertainment places, hotels. I mean, think about the folks who work in places like that. A lot of time they're making minimum wage or maybe just a bit more. So I think a lot of it's simple economics from that standpoint. But then you also have that issue of safety regarding COVID. So there are people who didn't want to leave, even if they still had a job. They might have felt afraid because they might have had an underlying health condition or take care of someone at home who's very vulnerable. So sometimes people had to make choices, even if their hours weren't being reduced or their job wasn't cut. They might not have felt like they could continue to work because they felt like they're putting a loved one's life in danger or
Right.
their own life. So those are just some examples.
And now with, we're into vaccine, you're seeing some of this stuff. And it's actually two-part question. One is, you've been in this space for a very long time. And you've seen homelessness, you've seen addiction, you've seen underserved communities, seen, hungry bellies. Why continue to work in it if it never seems like it's going to end? It's,
Good question.
yeah, talk to me
Yeah,
about that.
I really like that question. I've probably had a few different answers to that over the years. I mean, one reason is like if someone walked up to me and said, I'm hungry, I would be like, hang on, we have something. And I would get them something. I just could never look at someone who's hungry and not do what I could to meet their need. And so, I could walk around the north side and try to give everybody a sandwich, or I could work a little more systemically, which is what I have done primarily in raising money for organizations that are meeting that need. But the way I would answer it now is I love food rescue, and I love our technology because I think this actually solves the problem. I think that it really is a game changer when you have food waste and you have hungry people, and through technology and like a giant army of volunteers, you can solve that problem. The director of the City of Pittsburgh Housing Authority was quoted as basically saying that 412 Food Rescue um, solved food insecurity within the housing authority, as evidenced by the reduction down to zero of requests for food assistance
Wow.
because our volunteers were bringing fresh food to these housing units. And so we can solve it. It's possible. We need to fund it. We
Mhm.
need to distribute it. We need to get it out there. Um, but we can solve it. There's no reason why anyone should be hungry. We have enough food. It's a logistics and transportation problem, but we figured it out. There's an answer. And that is super exciting to me.
You just gave me goosebumps, which I think is amazing. Here's the so and Pittsburghers are great. I mean, let's just go on the record and say more than not, if you're like, I need help, it doesn't matter day or night, you're gonna find somebody that's gonna be able to help you in Pittsburgh. How does this work in other cities? Not to say that other cities don't have.
Yeah, I mean, we're from the Berg, and we can't help it, but deeply, deeply believe that we are the best. But having worked in a lot of different cities, I see a similar commitment. Just as evidenced by food rescue happens in just about every city. It's like in every city, there were, two people like me and you, and having a conversation about how ridiculous it is that there's food that gets thrown out in these dumpsters. And you have, on the other hand, these people, and hey, you know what? We should do something about that. We just have to figure out how to get this food to the people. I mean, this has happened hundreds and hundreds of times. There are food rescue organizations in other cities. So people are thinking along the same lines, right? Like people see the problem and see that it can be solved. But the limit to growth for most food rescue organizations is, at what point do we buy a truck? At what point do we hire a full-time person? Now, okay, we have more than we can handle. Do we buy another truck? That's a really big investment. Can we really make sure that we can handle, two full-time employees? And so those decisions are, limit the growth and scaling of the organization. And so with the technology and with unlimited volunteers, you can scale and grow without making those gigantic investments every time you kind of get to the next step. And so food rescue is happening everywhere, and we can scale it everywhere with this technology. And I love the idea of being a part of that. Like, I feel like we're really solving, like people make jokes about, solving world peace and, ending hunger. And I'm like, we actually are. And I think that's amazing to be a part of.
Will you see, this might be a loaded question, will you see partnerships with food banks and other things that you do because you're able to do um, something a little different from what they're doing because they are solving a need as well. I mean, you have to have the food banks to be able to feed so many people, but to be able to partner with those places and also deliver fresh produce, I think would be really important.
Yeah, I think that, food banks definitely have a different model. And I think that both food rescue and the food bank model are critical. They both need to happen.
Right.
Food rescue is never going to deliver thousands of cans of beans and, things like that. And people need that too.
Yeah, they do.
So I think that, they can work together. We do at 412 Food Rescue, we do work with the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. So some food rescues have really close relationships with their local food bank. Some are actually kind of hybrid organizations. There are some organizations that do a little bit of both, where they're kind of storing some of the food, but also delivering the fresh stuff. So I think both are important. I think working together is important. But the idea of like acquiring a lot of shelf-stable food, storing it and distributing it in a particular way is a different model than how we deal with fresh food. And so I think both are necessary.
And thinking about that, have you seen, and this is just kind of in the Pittsburgh region, is there's been, I think, a lot more collaboration in terms of what's happening in this segment. You see a lot more people coming together to really start solving and changing the trajectory of some of the things that have been going on for generations. And are you excited about that? What does that, I mean, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah, we have many hundreds, probably close to 1,000, partners that are food donor partners and our nonprofit partners throughout our network. All of our partners in other cities have those same, types of partnerships. And it really is incredible to kind of be a convener, even if we're not getting together and meeting, but this great restaurant that has your favorite food is one of our food donor partners. And when they have something that they can't use, they're going to call us and make it available. And then we have all of these nonprofit organizations that already know the people in their neighborhood and are the ones who are distributing it to people in need. And we're recruiting the volunteers and providing the technology platform. All of those things working together is really amazing. And when I look at the lists of all the restaurants and the grocery stores that, are our food donors, even just here at the local level, and it's like I scanned, oh, I had my birthday at that restaurant. Oh, my favorite thing to eat at that restaurant is this. Oh, is that place still around? I've got to go back there. And it's just such a hometown proud kind of thing. And I think that once you have the level of brand awareness that 412 Food Rescue does locally, I don't think there are too many restaurants or grocery stores that haven't heard something about us at this point. And so that commitment to strong marketing, I think, has been a huge key to the success, both in recruiting food donors, recruiting nonprofit organizations to distribute the food, and getting volunteers as well to download the app.
There's a lot of integrity, I think, around the organization, and now branching out as you have with Food Rescue Hero as the tech behind it. How many cities are you guys in now?
We're in 12 cities partnering with 10 food rescue organizations.
And that same kind of bubbling up of volunteers and people really surrounding this cause is quite phenomenal and important, and it should happen. I have friends that deliver for 412 Rescue and they love it. They love it. They love when their phone goes. I mean, it's just they absolutely love it, and it's amazing. I downloaded the app and I did it over a weekend, and I couldn't believe how many pops you get on the app. Just the activity that goes on. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, my mom is a volunteer. And we have a lot of retirees that are some of our favorite volunteers. They're very dedicated. I think that it speaks to, the app is pretty, straightforward. You don't have to be like a techie to use it. And especially during COVID, it's a great volunteer opportunity because you're not with a group of people, you're not standing around inside doing something. You put your mask on, you go pick up the box from the grocery store and take it to, the soup kitchen down the street. And I think that it's a really hands-on way to be helping your community, because we do hear so much on the news now about food insecurity, and people do want to help. Um, our CEO and founder, Leah Lizarrando, likes to say that people are wired to help. We just need to give them the opportunity. And that's always been my experience. People want to help.
Which is not just in Pittsburgh, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think everywhere. I definitely think everywhere, even in Canada.
Especially in Canada.
Maybe more in Canada.
Yeah, probably. It's a magical place. Magical
right.
place.
Everyone is nice to each other.
Yes. Well, one would hope. So, all right. So, I think I do think it's amazing. I love the organization. I love anything that you're involved in, and I do feel like these are topics that people have to understand, because I think if you don't live in spaces and places that you see it, you don't really know that it's going on. And I think there needs to be more of a observance of, I don't know about that, I need to learn about that. And I think that's incredible. So talk to me, how can people learn about what you guys are doing? Where can they help? Maybe organizations that want to come on board? I mean, is Food Rescue Hero, what do you got? What's the next big thing?
Yeah, so locally in Pittsburgh, going to the 412 Food Rescue website, you can learn about everything 412 Food Rescue does. If you're local here in Pittsburgh, you can download the 412 Food Rescue app. Mm-hmm. If you are in another place, you could go to the foodrescuehero.org website to see what cities we are in. If we're in a city where you are, you can download the app for that organization. And if we're not in your city, we actually kind of have a new engagement tool that people can get involved with. So we call our volunteers who drive the food rescue heroes. We call people who are kind of interested in what we do and are passionate about food rescue and want to be a part of our network, but we're not in their city yet. We call them food rescue champions. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole section on our website, foodrescuehero.org, about food rescue champions, bringing Food Rescue Hero to your city, how to reduce food waste at home, that sort of stuff.
That's fantastic. And then, I mean, what's coming? What are you most excited about for the spring and summer? What's happening in your world? Just you alone. Yeah.
Well, work-wise, I'm looking forward to getting on the road as things become a bit more normal. I've always kind of had work travel as part of what I do, and so the last year has been a little tough. I remember being in Boston Airport on about March 12th, and it was a ghost town last year, and I thought, probably not gonna be doing this too much for a while.
I think I was texting you because when you were flying in or out or something. I remember that.
Very strange. It was like 9 a.m. at Logan Airport. I took an early flight and landed and was doing some work at the airport before I was getting, in my rental car and going to a meeting. And it was like a ghost town. It was like it was midnight. And it was very strange. And I don't think I definitely have not been in a place like that since then. So I'm looking forward to things getting back to normal and being able to, visit some of our partners in other cities. But then I also think for myself, my daughter plays basketball and soccer. And I was just talking to my husband about, the startup of soccer season, which is just in a couple of weeks. And I am really excited about that, just to be able to stand on the sidelines and talk to my soccer parent friends, I'm really looking forward to kids sports picking back up.
That's good. That's very good. Well, Jess, I appreciate you and everything that you continuously do all of the time, because I think it shows your heart and, you know, your greater purpose. And I think that's quite incredible. So thank you for being with me today. We were almost an hour, which is crazy. But I really appreciate you just being here with us and, you know, being my friend. So thank you
Oh,
for that. Yeah.
like I said, anything you ask me to do, I'll do. I should
Writing that down.
probably keep saying that, but it's always fun to talk to you and just be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, then I will see you soon.
Sounds good.
Okay.